All right, hello and welcome. Let's get into Much Ado About Elizabethan Ideologies, a glimpse into an age through a play. So we are going to think about some of the prevailing worldviews and philosophies during Elizabethan England, during Shakespeare's time when he was writing these plays, particularly Much Ado. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about some of Much Ado as we use the historical context of the time to have a glimpse into the play, and the play as a way to glimpse into an age, the Elizabethan age. So, the play's title is very ironic, isn't it? For the play deals with serious issues such as an apparent death, a fiery romance between two independent individuals, and a false accusation. And when we think about the false accusation, was that of a man? Oh, boop, boop, boop. Nope. You guessed it, it's a woman. So, as much as the play is Much Ado About Nothing, is there much more substance and much more something to it? And so we've got our irony. Language note, nothing during Shakespeare's time would have been pronounced noting. So you really want to look for those puns everywhere. There's puns on overhearing, slander, musical notation, sexuality, what are people noting about others. So it's a lot of fun throughout the play. And this concept of mature, this play is thought to be one of Shakespeare's three mature comedy plays alongside The Merchant of Venice, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night. Now, when we think of mature, we might not think that some of the interactions between folks like Benedict and Beatrice are super mature, or even Hero and Lysander, or even the prince, Don Pedro, right? But when we're talking about a mature comedy, we're talking about sophistication in the storytelling, in the verse patterns, in the realism of the prose, the extended combat, complex double plot, lovers' couplings, and combat with dialogue, right? And different things like that. So just a little bit of background about Much Ado. It's thought to have been written in 1598, and it was also thought to have been first printed in the quarto form in 1600. We'll get into this much more when we really dive into the folios and the quartos, but just a real quick snapshot into that. The folio is considered like a hardback book, and the quarto is like a paperback. So just like paperbacks are less expensive and more readily available than hardbacks being more expensive and sort of fancy, excuse me. That's similar for the folio and the quarto. Folio being the hardback, fancier, larger version, and the paperback being the quarto, the smaller, more accessible, inexpensive version. But we'll get into which one is considered the premier version, and sort of maybe like bootlegged versions when we talk about folios and quartos later. In terms of the source, we have a principal source for the Hero Claudio plot. It's the 22nd story from Matteo Bandello's Italian novelle, published in 1554. The story of the falsely accused maiden surfaces quite frequently in Greek and Roman romances, and is repeated in Renaissance sources like Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen, published in 1590, and Ludovico Aristo's Orlando Furioso, in Italian 1516 and English 1591. There's no real original source identified for Beatrice Benedict plotline or for the Dogberry episodes. And so they are outstanding original creations. I do want to take a moment to share a little bit of background about methods of law enforcement in early modern England, which is Shakespeare's time, and the Elizabethan perspective on law enforcement. So, although there are some changes that were made to improve law enforcement between 1500 and 1700, mostly there was continuity from the system used in medieval England, especially during Shakespeare's time. Therefore, there was no organized police force as we would conceive it today. Shakespeare has a number of funny scenes that involve Renaissance law enforcement and enforcement officers, sometimes called constables or members of the watch, such as with Much Ado About Nothing and Dogberry and his members of the watch. They're considered lowly characters and they serve as fool-like characters of the play. And at this time, most often, they wouldn't really recognize a criminal if they really ran into one, and the constables would sort of be volunteers who wouldn't be compensated for their time, and then the members of the watch would be volunteers, and so they wouldn't have any sort of training, and then they would rely on the citizens to come forward with any information they might have, and so you'll see a lot of that play out with Dogberry in this play. And in his way, I want you to think about how Shakespeare, he allows these characters, Dogberry, to be successful and triumph in the end. And so what might Shakespeare be saying or doing with the handling? Is he just being kind and gentle? Is there something deeper that he's putting forward here? So let's go ahead and move on here. So what you want, a couple of things I think that really stand out quite a bit, especially in the manga version of this play, are motifs of death and rebirth. I want you to also keep this in mind with the play, with some of the other plays as well, particularly Winter's Tale. And then, as has been mentioned in class, we have this overarching sort of plot line that these are soldiers coming back from war. So we have this real wartime switching to peacetime, and then how does that allow for more carpe diem, eating, drinking, and being merry, for tomorrow we may die? How does it also switch from that war mentality to this love, enjoy life, and amorous reality? But then how do we also see some things like the battle of the sexes, or continuing the military imagery and diction when it deals with matters of the hearts. And we had sort of this battling with in A Midsummer Night's Dream too. In many of Shakespeare's plays, we're going to have appearance versus reality, and it's alive and well in this play as well. And so you're going to want to look for disguise devices, role playing, mask use, and you're going to want to think about the literal and the figurative, and also think just about human nature and human behaviors. And when do we mask ourselves? When do we reveal our true selves? Who do we let in to see our true selves? Who do we when are we role playing? When are we being authentic? And so think about the different settings and the way that Shakespeare uses this concept of appearance and reality, and any arguments he might be making along with it. And similar to Bottom with A Midsummer Night's Dream, we will also have our malpropisms and puns, lots of them, and a lot with the bantering back and forth between Benedict and Beatrice and other characters as well. This comedy is rife with so much rich, humorous wordplay. But also consider Dogberry's role and how he might parody the linguistic expertise of those around him, and also as he's trying to better himself by speaking like the people who would be of higher standing around him, what that might say about his aspirations in this rigidly confined classist structure in society at the time. We're also going to have a lot of dramatic irony, so please consider and think about and identify when is the audience aware of something, when the characters are not, and what does that do for the play? What does that do for the audience goer? What does that do for the actors? What does that do for Shakespeare's play in general? I want you to continue to also ponder. Current scholarship has shown interest in these following areas. And so these are things you might keep in mind and ponder and try to identify or tease out ideas related to any of these concepts. And these could certainly be paper topics as well for this play and for other plays, but particularly in this play. So keep that in mind, please. And then we're going to get to another really strong philosophical perspective and even religious perspective in some ways in England during Shakespeare's time, and that's the great chain of being. I in the beginning, and it's God, right? God's the top, and you can see this is actually an image from the Renaissance, and we've got this. This is sort of like a take off of Jacob's ladder, climbing up to God, to the heavens. But then it's also, here is the pinnacle, the height, and that's where God is. And then going down each step, this is what is on these words here. God, angel, heaven, so on and so forth. And you can also see this as being the ladder of intellect. And so most everyone in England during this time was a Christian, as we mentioned in class, usually a Protestant or a Catholic. There would be folks who might be Muslim and might have other Hinduism and faith, but by and large, the major group in society would hold to a Christian faith. And so this story of creation was seen as a progression of light to waters, to earth, to planets, to animals, to finally humans. And most Elizabethans followed this Judeo-Christian Bible and believed that God set out an order for everything in the universe, which is known as the Great Chain of Being. And it provides for an orderly progression to move upward. And that's what I was describing with this ladder. But as much as, and it's not that people on earth can move upward, and that's sort of what we'll talk about in a moment, but the spiritual idea of shedding the human and being heavenly minded and moving upward to heaven ultimately, right? But per the worldview of Great Chain of Being, folks believe that God created a social order for everybody and chose where everybody belonged within that social or class order. Right? Therefore, the king and queen were at the top. And the reason for that is the monarch was at the top of existence because God put them there. And they were only answerable to God through the divine right of kings, which we may get to a little bit later. But ultimately, it's what Queen Elizabeth and King James both held to in affirming that their space on the throne, and that through biology and succession of the different lines, that they are the correct, chosen, anointed by God person to be ruling. And that imbues them with all sorts of powers and authorities. And therefore, disobeying a monarch was tantamount to committing sin on that spiritual plane, but also in the earthly plane, following the religious beliefs. It's also on the political plane considered as being committing treason or being treasonous. So this great chain of being includes everything from minerals and rocks at the very bottom. You see stone, and then we go to different elements with flame and air and plant, and then beast. And then we move from inanimate to animate to having a soul with the human, and then we get to the heavens, air, angel, and then God. And so it moves from being a pure spirit at the top of the chain to things merely made of matter at the bottom. Or you could think of it mere matter at the bottom up to spirit at the top. And humans are in the middle, right? Because they are made of matter, mostly mortal, but then they're also made of spirit because of the soul component. And so this theory began with Greek philosophers, Aristotle and Plato, and was the basic tenet of Elizabethan thought. Now, with this theory, there's a sense of order and its consequent fixed hierarchy. And it was very convenient for the stability, to maintain stability and power of the church and of the state, the monarchs, so those in power. Shakespeare, in his plays, often uses this belief in the hierarchical structure of existence that kept the rich and powerful in power and the religious leaders in control as a means to explore not only the themes of social order, power, and the consequences of disrupting the quote-unquote natural order per the chain of being, but also to reflect on the anxieties and uncertainties surrounding the concept, particularly when challenged or disrupted. And this is something that he delves into even more in the tragedies, because in the tragedies and the histories, it's dealing more with this concept of treason and this concept of tyrants, and what is a society to do if the ruling monarch is a tyrant or is tyrannical. So are they held to the same standard? Is it still sin to rebel against a monarch who does not have your well-being at the forefront of their mind? Is it still treason? Is it sin? Or is it good citizenship? So I want you to keep this in mind too as you're reading this play, because there's a lot within it. Elizabethans praised order and harmony and where we see this chain of being changing on the spiritual realm, on the human realm, it was very fixed. And wherever you were born into, that's pretty much where you were. And there wasn't too much social mobility or progression. And in fact, your clothing, when we get to this appearance well, you know what, we'll save that for another day. Okay, let's get back here. So here's just another way for you to look at it. There's a hierarchy, there's no gaps. It's one classification to the next, and it moves from existence to life, from inanimate to animate, to having feeling and intellect, to feeling to understanding. And so we can see we move from earth to water. Even within there's a hierarchy within the religious structure, just like there's a hierarchy within the social structure. And so And again, the affixed nature of things. You are in a class, you are in a classification, you are also in a social structure, a stage in the social order, or a class in the social order, and there's not much, moving through that. So now, when we get to the elements and the humors, in Shakespeare's time, the world was believed to be composed of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The human body was thought to represent those 4 elements as the 4 humors or bodily fluids. And those fluids would be blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. And those humors, those bodily fluids, would also affect someone's humor or temperament or personality. It would influence their health. If they had too much blood, it could cause a health problem. It could manifest in a certain personality trait. If they had too little blood, it could be a different personality trait. It's quite fascinating that even contemporary medicine and even some Chinese medicine apply similar principles about the elements, the organs like the body, the blood, and the liver, and the humors to certain health issues and certain personality traits. So the elements, they, and here are their qualities, they lead to the world at this time is thought to be made up of 4 elements. The different bodily fluids, humors, yellow bile, spleen, and so I share with you the bodily fluid and the organ that it connects to, because sometimes you'll hear one of the characters either say your spleen is overactive, and then this is the character trait, that this is the healthy trait or unhealthy trait that they are hearkening to for that character. And then the humors, their temperament, their the humor that is associated with and that is manifested through the yellow bile or the spleen. And then we get to the personality trait or the temperament. So the humor would be the temperament, and then this would be the sort of way that that temperament is manifested through the personality traits. So you can sort of see this connection. So the black bile is thought to be connected with the gallbladder, is connected with the earth. It's cold and dry, and then it becomes melancholic, and you're introspective, and you might look like a sallow, thin human being. So you can see sort of even how that's manifested in either the rosiness of the cheeks or the sunken in of the cheeks. So it would be even the character and the body of the character. So the 4 elements with the 4 qualities of cold, hot, moist, and dry, coupled with the 4 humors with the physical qualities of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, correspond to these certain personality traits, temperaments, or you might even call them nature. And Shakespeare his plays often reflect this humoral theory, with characters, their personalities and behaviors being influenced by their perceived humoral balance or imbalance. For example, a character with an excess of black bile might be portrayed as melancholic, and therefore be prone to sadness, and that would be someone like Hamlet that we're familiar with. In terms of Petruchio in The Taming of the Shrew, he is very much a choleric character who is ruled by his spleen, and he's very short-tempered, and he might even be red-haired. But we're not saying all gingers are like this, right? He could also be ambitious, which isn't a bad thing. We saw the sanguine being ruled by more blood or the liver forward. Optimistic, red cheek. Often bottom is portrayed as with a robust figure, a corpulent figure. Can sometimes be seen as irresponsible. Angelo from Measure for Measure is also another melancholic character. Um, yep, I think that's all I really want to say about that. So there you go. So now we're going to move to It's All in the Stars. And here is a picture of the different signs and how they're represented symbolically. And these are the signs of the zodiac, and they're depicting the various activities of the month. And so you can see the outer and inner circle. And this is looking at, during Shakespeare's time, looking at sort of the binary of the signs, and the two principles being the male and the female on that binary, right? And not really accounting for the spectrum in between. But we have the female is sort of overseeing or being represented by summer, love, and passion. And then male is being connected to winter, thought, reason. And then you can see how the other parts are in relation to that. The dominant sign was thought to have an influence of the body. So different signs of the zodiac would correspond to the different parts of the body. We're going to continue our astrological thinking, and belief in astrology was another worldview commonly held in Elizabethan England, with many people believing that the positions and movements of the stars could influence events on Earth, even influence human being behavior, and certainly a connection between the stars, the placement of the stars and the planets when people were born, under what star, what moon, what sun. That's horoscopes, right? Dealing with horoscopes, reading astrology, that is a belief that many still hold today. In fact, during Shakespeare's time, the word astronomy and astrology were interchangeable. Astronomy could mean horoscopes and predictions, while astrology could mean what astronomy does today. And astronomers of the time would be doing some of the scientific stuff and looking at the scientific things that we think of with astronomy today, while also practicing astrology and offering horoscope readings. And so Shakespeare's, each person is thought to have been born under the influence of a particular planet or star, which governs his, her, their personality in some fashion, which relates to its own purpose. And so depending on the character and the play, Shakespeare will explore both a belief in and a skepticism toward the star's influence on human fate. And terms like the stars could mean luck or fortune, as well as the star or planet under which people were born, that imbued them with different qualities and personality traits that linked their nature to that particular planet under which they were born, such as Mars would be someone who might be quick to anger, or Venus, someone who is more prone to love or passion. And I think it's also good to note that when we're looking at the planets and their names, we can also draw on Roman mythology and the personality traits associated with those mythological characters. Shakespeare often focuses more on Roman mythology. He seems to have an affinity for Italy and all things Italian. And so he doesn't use Greek mythological names as much. So you can see Mercury, you can see the influence that that planet would have on a human. And then you can see the personality trait that might that might come as a result. And so when we're thinking about Mercury, we're thinking about also it would be the Greek god Hermes, the god of translators and interpreters, most clever of the Olympian gods, and served as a messenger for all the gods. And Mercury ruled over wealth and good fortune, commerce, fertility, and thievery. But if someone's thought to be mercurial, that means that person's changeable. And might that be maybe Benedict in this play, right? So think about if any of these characters, when Shakespeare's making these, other characters call out different things about whether it's the Roman gods and goddesses or the planets and the stars. These are some of the things he's pulling from. For Venus, it's the ancient Italian goddess associated with cultivated fields and gardens, who later was identified by Romans with Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, who is intimately associated with love, beauty, desire, sexuality, fertility, prosperity, and victory. She also symbolized Rome's imperial power. Mars would be the counterpart, is the Greek god Ares. In ancient Rome was the second in importance only to Jupiter, who would be Zeus, the king of the gods. Mars developed into the god of war in Roman literature. He was the protector of Rome, which was a nation proud in war. Mars festival occurred in spring and fall, and the beginning and end of both the agricultural and the military seasons. The month of March was named after him, and it's telling that this play, Much Ado About Nothing, is beginning at the end of the military season, right? So now that's entering in and ushering in a new time of love, Venus. But then it's also allowing for this concept of how closely related are love and war. And is Shakespeare drawing a connection between that with some of the barbs and insults and bantering, sometimes playful, sometimes not, between some of the characters. When we get to Jupiter, Jove, linked to god Zeus, and known as the sky and thunder god, who was believed to oversee all aspects of life and was the protector of ancient Rome. Juno is Jupiter's wife and sister. Gets creepy, right? That's what mythology does. And Saturn's son. And he's considered the supreme deity of the Roman pantheon. And then Saturn is the god of sowing or seed, equated to Greeks' god Cronus, held jurisdiction over agriculture and the harvest, also connected with time, the seasons and harvest time. And it was believed that he once ruled a golden age before Jupiter or Zeus, his son, Cronus's or Saturn's son, came into power. So I hope you will find enjoyment and discover answers to how these things are connected, how they play through the Shakespeare's play, and what arguments he might be trying to make. I don't think that I mentioned that Shakespeare's also using some of this to question fixed ideologies, to challenge fixed ideologies, right? To what happens is with when people challenge the fixed hierarchy of the time. What happens when they challenge this natural order of the chain of being, whether it's with gender, sexuality, social class. So I want you to think about how some of this works throughout the play and what you might come to see. And do we see any of ourselves, our contemporary lives, portrayed through this? And here's a quotation, and think about who said it, when and where, what's the meaning? And I look forward to talking to you about this next time. Cheers!